If you've ever replayed a conversation in your head hours after it ended, wondering if you said the wrong thing or said too much or not enough, you already know what this feels like. And the strange part, you weren't anxious about something that was happening. You were anxious about something that was already over. That's the quiet world of the overthinker. Not dramatic, not obvious to anyone else, just a mind that never quite stops, looping, reviewing, questioning, bracing. And most people who experience this don't call it overthinking. They call it caring, or being thorough, or just the way their mind works. But psychology has a different name for it, and understanding what's actually happening beneath the surface changes everything about how you see yourself. Researchers call it repetitive negative thinking, and it's defined not by what you're thinking about, but by how you're thinking. It's repetitive, it's passive, it feels largely out of your control, and it's always circling around something negative, a fear, a regret, a worst-case scenario you can't stop building in your mind. Here's what makes it worth understanding. This isn't a personality flaw, it's a pattern, a process, something the mind learned to do and kept doing because at some level it felt useful. Think about it this way. When you were growing up, your brain was constantly scanning for threats. It learned that thinking things through, preparing, anticipating, reviewing, helped you stay safe, stay ready. So the brain didn't develop overthinking as a problem, it developed it as protection. That's not weakness, that's adaptation. Now, here's something most people don't realize. There's a meaningful difference between deep thinking and overthinking. And it's not about how long you spend thinking, it's about the direction the thinking goes. Healthy, productive thought moves towards something. It asks, how did this happen? What can I actually do? It's concrete, it has a shape, it points to an action or a decision. Overthinking moves in circles. It asks, why does this always happen to me? What does this say about who I am? These are abstract questions, open-ended ones, and your brain can't answer them, not really, because they don't have a clear finish line. One psychologist described it this way: your brain is like a task manager. When you give it a concrete problem, it can work through it and close the file. But when you give it a nebulous question, one with no real answer, it just keeps the file open, and it keeps checking it, over and over. That's the loop, not a character flaw, a mismatch between the question you're asking and the kind of question your mind can actually resolve. If you relate to this, you are not alone. You can share your experience in the comments if you feel comfortable. Most people think they overthink because they care too much, or because they're perfectionists, or because they're just anxious by nature. But the real reason, the one that shows up in the neuroscience, is about control. Overthinking is the mind's attempt to make the uncertain feel certain. It's a way of saying, if I think about this enough, I'll be prepared. If I run through every possible outcome, nothing will catch me off guard. The mind isn't trying to torture you, it's trying to protect you from surprise, from embarrassment, from being unprepared. But here's the part that matters. The brain can't actually learn that this isn't working.
And that's because the consequences of overthinking are delayed. You spend an hour in your head rehearsing a difficult conversation, and nothing terrible happens. So your brain files that as, this worked, let's do it again. Researchers call this a failure in credit assignment. The brain can't trace the discomfort back to the loop itself, so the loop continues. And over time, it becomes automatic, a default setting the mind slips into whenever it encounters uncertainty. There's a framework in clinical neuroscience that describes overthinking as a kind of mental stumble. The same way your body can lose its balance mid-step, your mind can lose its footing mid-thought. When you're walking and your foot catches on something, your motor system scrambles to catch up. You don't choose to stumble. The coordination just fails for a moment. Overthinking works the same way. The mind selects a question it can't actually answer, something abstract and open-ended, and gets stuck in a loop it doesn't know how to exit, not because you're broken, because the mental coordination required to shift gears just didn't engage in time. And what makes certain people more prone to this? Sensitivity to uncertainty, a lower tolerance for not knowing. The more uncomfortable the unknown feels, the more the mind generates what-ifs in an attempt to close the gap, even when no amount of thinking can actually close it. People who overthink are often some of the most observant, empathetic, and detail-oriented people in the room. They notice things others miss. They think before they speak. They consider consequences others don't think to consider. But that same quality, that heightened awareness, is also the thing that gets them stuck, because a mind that notices everything also worries about everything. A mind that sees every angle also second-guesses every decision. There's a particular version of this that shows up in relationships. The person who rereads a text 5 times before sending it, who replays a conversation looking for evidence that they said something wrong, who apologizes for things that didn't need apologizing for, just to preemptively close any gap that might exist. And underneath all of it, underneath the replaying and the second guessing and the what-ifs, is usually one quiet central fear. What if I'm not enough? What if I got it wrong? What if people see something in me that I haven't been able to fix? That's not overthinking about the situation. That's the mind using the situation to circle back to something older, something deeper.
So this is what overthinking actually is. Not a weakness, not a quirk. A pattern that the mind built to manage uncertainty. One that made sense once and kept running long after the original threat had passed. It's a loop without a clear exit. A question the brain keeps asking because it never received a satisfying answer. A way of scanning for safety that never quite lands on safe. And what changes when you understand that? Not the thoughts themselves, not immediately, but something shifts in how you relate to them. When a thought comes back for the 4th time in an hour, instead of fighting it or following it all the way down, you can recognize it. You can name it. There goes that open file again. There's my brain trying to solve a problem that doesn't have a solution it can offer. Once you see the pattern, you can't quite unsee it. And that awareness, just that, is already something different than where you started. If this explains something for you, there's more to uncover. We explore patterns like this regularly. Quiet psychology here. If this resonated with you, you can share it with someone who thinks the same way.